president of the Brooklyn Temple, 1982 to 83. From 1996 up to 2008, he served continuously as the chairman of the North American SGBC for the Freeport Temple. So this is a brief introduction, as I mentioned, of Maharaj. Maharaj, if you are there, you can please unmute. So we'd like to let us all welcome Maharaj in our traditional way by loudly chanting Hari Bol 3 times. Hari Bol! Hari Bol! Hari Bol! Hare Krishna, Maharaj.
I'm here.
Okay.
How do you like the background? Looks like I'm in Guyana, huh? You hear me?
Yes, Maharaj.
Okay. So we have 1 hour. Is that correct?
Yes, Maharaj.
Okay.
1 hour.
My understanding is that you're conducting a series of talks or the seminar on the 6 items of surrender, Anukulyasya Sankalpa. That's my understanding. And the request for me is to speak on dasyam, the role of the function of service, I would assume, in the whole process of surrender or taking shelter of Krishna. So I thought a nice place to begin this discussion is with Lord Chaitanya giving us an understanding of what dasyam is. In his teachings, we find in Chaitanya Charitamrita, he explains that this position of dasyam is the swarupa, or the constitutional position of a living entity. Jiver swarupaya krishnera nitya das. We're eternally, by constitution, a servant of Krishna. Another nice definition or explanation of dasyam is found in the section of Srimad Bhagavatam where Prahlad Maharaj is explaining to his father what's the best thing that he's learned. His father was thinking it would be what he heard from Shanda and Amarka, but that wasn't the best thing that he heard. It was from Narada. And what he heard from Narada is devotional service. The best thing he's heard is devotional service. And when he answers his father, he gives the 9 processes of bhakti, starting with Shravanam Kirtanam. And in that list of the 9 processes of bhakti, dasyam is listed. And what Srila Prabhupada writes, it's a very short purport explaining dasya, bhakti. But it's short, but it's very clear. I'd like to read. After many, many thousands of births, when one comes to understand that he is an eternal servant of Krishna, when he comes to understand that he is an eternal servant of Krishna, 2 things. First, such a person can deliver others from this universe. Sounds like a lot of empowerment to deliver others from this universe just by understanding this is your constitutional position, being Krishna's servant eternally. But not only that, Prabhupada writes, if one simply continues to think that he is an eternal servant of Krishna, even without performing any of the other 8 processes of bhakti, he can attain full success. Just the carrying, the understanding, continue to think that he is an eternal servant of Krishna. all success and all the other processes of bhakti are fulfilled. Simply by this feeling, one can perform all 9 processes of devotional service. It's very powerful. Dasyam, or carrying the understanding that it's our constitutional position eternally to be Krishna's servant. So that's the topic with some small definition. And because I heard this introduction before, when I was first living in a temple, I started hearing, this is 1970, I started hearing about Prahlad Maharaj. And very quickly, Prahlad Maharaj became one of my heroes. And much to my surprise, shortly after that, Srila Prabhupada arranged for us to have a magazine to distribute, Teachings of Prahlad Maharaj. It was a half-sized stapled magazine, smaller than Back to Godhead in size and thickness. But it was fantastic because Prahlad is one of my heroes. And many of you probably also have some affinity and appreciation for Prahlad. So there's a teaching found in Prahlad's prayers to Lord Nrsingadev. You'll find it if you can look in your Bhagavatam later. Canto 7, Chapter 10, text number 6. And in that, he describes or defines what the mode of dasyam is. It's really simple. Because Lord Nrsingadev wants Prahlad to accept a benediction, and Prahlad says, thanks, but no thanks. Because I'm not a business person. I'm not doing something for you so that I can get something back from you. I'm not an entrepreneurial business person. That's not our relationship. Here's our relationship. You're the master, and I'm the servant, and there's nothing else between us. His words are very beautiful. Let me read them. I am your unmotivated servant, and you are my eternal master. There is no need of our being anything other than master and servant. You are naturally my master, and I am naturally your servant. We have no other relationship. What else? What does there remain left to be said about dasyam? He said it 3 times in one simple sentence, very direct, very straightforward, very clear. And he uses the word unmotivated. Unmotivated means there's spiritual motivation, but no material motivation. And that very same language we find in Rupa Goswami's teachings about his very important definition of bhakti. Anyabhilashata shunyam jnanakarmadhyanavratam. That's the devoid of material desire for sense enjoyment, speculation, and sense enjoyment that come from fruitive activities. So that's what pure devotional service is without. But then the pure devotional service, or the unalloyed, unmotivated devotional service, has a positive side. Anukulyena Krishnanushilanam Bhaktir Uttama. Anukulyena, which is exactly on the theme of, same word, as your seminar series, Anukulyasya Sankalpa. Anukulyena means, Anukul means accepting. And accepting what? Accepting that which is pleasing, favorable, for the pleasure of Krishna. Krishna Anu Shilanam, Anushilanam, following the path of previous personalities or perfected souls. Striving with this we can say like this. This is the heart of bhakti is rendering service to Krishna. The heart of bhakti is this anukulyena, Krishna Anushilanam. It's dasyam, wanting in all circumstances of life, no interruption, nothing can stop it, nothing can start it. It's spontaneous, it's for the pleasure of the Supreme Personality of Godhead in all circumstances of life. That's dasyam. For that matter, all forms of devotional service have dasyam. There's a very nice reference to the point I'm just making. Found in the Damodara Lila. Coming up very soon is the Damodar month. And during the Damodar month, we'll all be singing the prayers to Lord Damodar. And in that section, it's Canto 10, Chapter 9, there's two very special verses for those of you that like the Damodar month. Text 21 and 22 of Chapter 9. They're especially glorifying Mother Yashoda. How exalted is the love of Mother Yashoda. How exalted is her position in relation to Krishna. So here's that verse. You'll appreciate hearing this. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, the son of Mother Yashoda, is accessible to devotees engaged in spontaneous loving service, but he is not as easily accessible to mental speculators, to those striving for self-realization by severe austerities and penances, or to those who consider the body the same as the self. And in the purport, Prabhupada explains these three categories: the tapasvis, the yogis, and the gyanis. They may achieve something that's in the spiritual realm, beyond the material realm. Rarely, but they may. So sometimes it is asked, perhaps you've asked or perhaps you've wondered, the yogis that fix their mind on Supersoul, what's their attainment? And one of the possible attainments is described in the purport. They may attain Shantarasa. Sometimes it is said like that. But Prabhupada explains immediately that as far as we are concerned, devotional service begins with Dasya Rasa. And we're interested in devotional service. So from Dasya Rasa, other elements or features or moods of love for Krishna, when added, become friendship, parental affection, conjugal love, these primary rasas. It begins. Dasya is where devotional service begins. Now, one other thing that's, I think, important and should be discussed on this topic of dasyam. Dasyam, as just mentioned, is one of the 5 primary rasas. One of the 5 primary rasas. And because this is a Dussehra event, I think it's good for us to speak something about Hanuman. And because it's Dussehra festival, Hanuman engaged in the Yudhya Kanda section of Ramayana, his intense devotion to the personality of Godhead, singularly focused on what he's glorified for before, is crossing the ocean 800 miles, reaching the other shore, encountering Lankini, dealing with the Rakshasas, eventually finding Sita, the whole intrigue. He finds Sita. So mission accomplished, right? He could just go back and say, I found her, but that's not sufficient for Hanuman. He had to reassure Sita. Very beautiful section. Very beautiful section. 95 verses. He speaks, unbroken verses, glorifying the form of Ram, glorifying the activities of Ram, describing to Sita the efforts that he made to cross the ocean to find her, and the concluding verses, Sita, on behalf of Ram, I'm searching for you. Where are you, Sita? Where are you, Sita? And he's just above her head, a little monkey in the branch of the tree. And she's fearful because this may be a trick, but at the same time, who knows all these details and details and details about Ram? So he continues speaking, and he sees that her demeanor has finally become comforted. So then he jumps down from the tree and holds out the ring of Ram. And when she sees, she says, Oh, Hanuman, the risks that you have undergone, the challenge that you have met, all to carry the message of Ram to me. Oh, Hanuman, you are the best of the Lord's devotees. So who knows better than Sita who's the best of the Lord's devotees? Hanuman is the best of the Dasya Bhaktas. Fixed on the message of find Sita and having fulfilled it. After some other events, he returns back, informs Ram. Then the battle begins. They reach the shore of Lanka. There's a lot of confusion. What's going to happen? What's going to happen? I'm just going to read some passages of Hanuman's prowess on the battlefield. Desiring to put an end to his adversary, Ravana took a lance that was awarded to him by Lord Brahma and hurled it violently at Lakshmana. Although Lakshmana tried his best to counteract it with his weapons, the powerful lance pierced his chest. The wound was so great that Lakshmana fell to the ground. Then, as Lakshmana fought to remain conscious, Ravana came to arrest him. However, as the Rakshasa king grabbed him, Lakshmana remembered that he was a direct expansion of Lord Vishnu, and thus began to exhibit his unlimited prowess. Indeed, Ravana, who was able to lift the entire three worlds, was unable to pick up Lakshmana, even though exerting all his strength. As Ravana mounted his chariot, Hanuman suddenly darted forward, striking Ravana a violent blow to his chest with his fist. As blood flowed from his 10 mouths, 20 ears, and 20 eyes, Ravana fell down unconscious onto the floor of his chariot, causing all the monkeys to shout with joy, Hanuman, ki jai. Hanuman then went to where Lakshmana lay injured. Out of affection for Hanuman, Lakshmana again made his body light so Hanuman could carry him. Thus, the mystical lance, its mission completed, withdrew itself from Lakshmana's chest and returned to Ravana. Meanwhile, Ravana regained consciousness and again took up his bow. Lakshmana likewise stood up, his wounds completely healed by the inconceivable potency of Lord Vishnu. because so many monkeys had been struck down by Ravana, Ram decided that the time had come to personally approach him for combat. Here comes Hanuman. At Hanuman's request, Ram mounted on his shoulders and proceeded with great haste toward the Rakshasa king, challenging him to fight. With feelings of great enmity toward Ram, Ravana began showering his arrows upon Hanuman. However, since Hanuman remained unaffected, Ram was able to move next to Ravana's chariot and smash it to pieces. Then, taking up an effulgent arrow, Ram deeply pierced Ravana's chest, causing him to reel dizzily and drop his bow. Finally, after cutting off Ravana's flag, Ram declared, "You have performed a heroic feat by killing unlimited monkeys on the battlefield. Therefore, you must be quite exhausted from fighting, and I will refrain from killing you. You may return to Lanka to rest. When you're recovered, I will fight with you again. Go home and take a nap." Ravana's defeat, coupled with Ram's words, crushed his pride. As he returned to Lanka, his head hung down. Ram and Lakshman extracted the arrows from the monkeys' bodies. Upon witnessing Ravana's humiliation, the demigods and rishis stationed in the sky rejoiced in happiness, feeling confident that their mission would soon be accomplished. So although this is a discussion on Dasyam, it's also Dussehra, so we have to get on that battlefield with Ram and Hanuman and the Vanaras and witness the defeat of Ravana. Now, those who were assisting Lord Ramachandra were in various moods of dasya. Now, of course, Lakshman is more than dasya. He's his dear brother. And so there's mixtures of rasas, but primarily everyone's focus is the pleasure of Ram. The pleasure of Ram. And the pleasure of Ram is, of course, redeem Sita, regain Sita from the captivity of Ravana. But of course, there's further requirements. That's kill Ravana, because that's for the pleasure of the demigods. The demigods made their petition to Lord Vishnu, help. And so he responded, I will appear on earth and destroy Ravana and his horde of Rakshasas. We heard way back in Kishkinda that Tara said that the Vanaras are essential in order to destroy Ravana. They're, according to the spy work of Vali, she said, there were 1 trillion residents in Lanka. That's a lot of people. It's just one island. 1 trillion. Ravan boasts to Sita that his army consists of so many billion soldiers, armed soldiers. And the armed soldiers all had fierce weapons. And what did the Vanaras have? Rocks and trees and their fists. But they were empowered because of their mood of service. Along with dasyam, or the mood of trying to please the Supreme Lord all the time, in all circumstances, their empowerment is what defeated Ravan and his Rakshasa armies. So because this is Dussehra, I'll end with this nice narration of the final blow that destroyed Ravana, because that's what Dussehra is. Ram Vijayotsava. The chariot driver of Ram, Matali, who was Indra's chariot driver, said, "O valiant one, why are you still carrying out the battle with Ravana as though you were unaware of how to dispose of him? O Lord, you can employ a mystic missile presided over by Brahma, the Lord of creation. The time for his destruction has come now, as expressed by the celestials," because watching the whole scene are the devas. The devas may not be visible to everybody, but during these Vedic times, the devas were present during the pastimes of Lord Ramachandra, the pastimes of Krishna, and wherever they wanted to appear, they could make themselves available. So they were appealing, please do away with Ravan. Please do away with Ravan. Do it swiftly. Then the valiant Ram, who was reminded by Matali, took hold of a blazing arrow which was given by Brahma, and which in turn was given to him by the glorious sage Agastya earlier in the battlefield. And which looked like a hissing serpent, having been made formerly for Indra, it was bestowed in the past on the rulers of gods, who was desirous of conquering the three worlds. In its feathers, the power of Vayu, the wind god, was present. In its end point were the fire and the sun. It was as heavy as Mount Meru and Mandara. Its shaft was decked with gold and had the efficacy of ether, blazing like fire at the time of the universal dissolution, enveloped in smoke and looking like a venomous snake. It was swift in action and capable of bursting hosts of men, elephants, and horses. It broke gateways, iron bars, and even mountains, smeared with the blood of various victims and smeared with their marrow. It presented a very terrific appearance. That arrow had an efficacy of a thunderbolt, loud sounding, tearing off armies of adversaries in many battles and creating fear to all, like a hissing serpent. It was given perennial feed to vultures, eagles, cranes, troops of jackals and demons on the battlefield, possessing a form of Yama, the Lord of Death, and was fearful. That arrow bestowed joy on the monkey leaders and destroyed the demons. It was made speedy by tying various kinds of beautiful colored feathers of Garuda, the king of eagles, to it. So here we go. Ram's going to meet his death. Ravan going to meet his death. Marking it by a special mantra, Ram then fixed the arrow on the bow. While that excellent arrow was being fixed by Ram, all the beings were frightened and the earth trembled. Ram, who was enraged, stretched his bow well and with an attentive mind hurled that arrow which can tear open the vitals toward Ravana. That arrow, which was inviolable as a thunderbolt hurled by the arm of Indra, and irresistible as Yama, the Lord of Death, fell upon Ravan's chest. That arrow, released with great speed, and which was capable of destroying the body, tore off the heart of that evil-minded Ravana, tore away the life of Ravana, and having been anointed with blood, penetrated the earth and re-entered the quiver of Ram silently. From the hands of the slain Ravana, who was being separated from his life, fell his bow with its arrows fitted to it. Seeing Ravana fallen on the earth, the surviving demons, whose king had been killed, were panic-stricken and ran away to all sides. The monkeys, who fought with trees, fell upon the demons from all sides. Seeing the killing of Ravana, the monkeys assumed a triumphant appearance. Now, not everybody likes battle scenes, but it's that's what today is. It's the victory over Ravana. And so many devotees have been marshaled together to assist in this victory over Ravana. There's a passage in the Yudhakanda that's connected to the Dasyam topic, where there's some concern, the prowess of Indrajit and his Brahmastra and this and that, and so there's a little apprehension. And Ram says, do not think that there is any danger for any of us. He said, with the tip of my little finger, I could destroy the entire Lanka and all of the soldiers and all of its inhabitants. I don't even need the other fingers. I don't even need the rest of my little finger, just the tip of my little finger. I can destroy the whole thing. So what's going on if there's a big battle? It's giving an opportunity for others to do some service. At least in this case, it's killing of Ravana and the Rakshasas, which was one of the principal reasons for the personality of God is making his appearance. So we're being given an opportunity to serve the personality of Godhead through the agency of the disciplic succession. I think I'll end by telling a little Prabhupada story. Little Prabhupada story goes like this. One morning walk in Mayapur, Prabhupada was in a particular mood that morning where he was just appreciating and glorifying as if he had 10 mouths, in the language of the Chaitanya Charitamrita. Bhaktivinoda Thakur, describing what a visionary, what a powerful acharya, what a great author, what a great inspirer, what a great reformer, what a great this and that and the other thing. And all of his, so many achievements, and there was a pause, and somebody said then, why, if he was so capable, why did Bhaktivinoda Thakur not establish this Adbhuta Mandir that he had said, he had described? This Adbhuta Mandir is the TOVP. And Prabhupada, his voice became very soft instead of roaring like he was describing Bhaktivinoda Thakur, as he left something for us to do. And there is something for us to do in addition to TOVP, and that's the mission, furthering the mission of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Jiver Swarupa Hoy Krishna Nitya Das, to be eternally engaged in giving the message of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to the people all over the country, all over the world, without limitation. The challenges are great, our abilities are small. That's the mission. That's the mission of those who are servants of Lord Chaitanya and his disciplic succession. Take the message of Krishna and deliver it to others. This is our service. to become really qualified to carry out that service, dasya, bhakti, we need purity. We need to actually live by the teachings of bhakti so that the purity will replace the impurity, and then we can be fit instruments. But somehow or other, that's our mission. And those are my thoughts on this topic of dasyam, especially connected to anukulyasya, sankalpa, pratikulyasya varjanam, rakshishati vishva. So this principle of sharanagati, taking shelter of the personality of Godhead in the mode of his servant. So let's see. I believe we have some time, for some discussion. Now, I don't know if this is a discussion-oriented group or not. I'm looking at the screen here in front of me, and it looks like there's a lot of people attending. So let's see. You can unmute yourself and raise some topics for discussion, please.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, thank you very much for the wonderful discussion on the topic of Dasya this morning. I have a question, more of a clarification. You mentioned in your discussion the Lakshman, was at one point pierced with a lance, and then, while he was there, then he realized that he is Vishnu, whatever, and then later he was completely healed, and by the power
of Vishnu.
Later down in the Ramayana, it was mentioned again that he was injured.
Yes.
And this time, Hanuman had to go and get some herbs from him.
Yes.
From somewhere. And only by that herb he was able to recover. So I'm just wondering, the contrast between the two. Why didn't he recover, himself again? Then
he gave some service to Hanuman. He was giving some service. That's the whole idea. Is with the little finger of his hand, he could destroy the whole of Lanka and Ravana and the whole shebang. He was giving service opportunity to others. So, if he was giving service, the question you could have been asked in reverse. If he gave service to Hanuman in one case to go get some herbs, wasn't exactly, there's a nice discussion on how that happened, but he could have requested somebody to heal him from the penetration of the lance instead of Vishnu healed him. It's just a pastime. In one case, he's giving Hanuman some nice service. In the other case, he healed himself, or with the power of Vishnu, he healed himself because he's Vishnu. It's Lila. In one case, doing himself, another case, allowing someone to do for him. There are variegated moods in the Lord and His service.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Hare Krishna, are there any other questions or points for discussion?
Hare Krishna, can I ask a question?
Yes, Radhavalva Prabhu, please go ahead.
Okay. Hare Krishna Maharaj, please accept my obeisances.
Hare Krishna.
All right. So basically, it seems that the subject of Dasya, being servitive to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is, although it seems that it's not so exalted, it seems to be exalted because we were reading Krishna book, and the gopis are commenting on the fact, they're commending the boys that they have the ability to associate with Krishna in any circumstance and not be disturbed by who is looking on. Whereas the gopis, they had to wait for kind of secret situation.
Yeah.
So it seems to me that Dasya is so very nice. So
Yeah.
can you say something on?
Yeah. It's of course, the gopis broke out of the social constraint when circumstance required it, particularly when Krishna was getting on the chariot to leave. They left their shyness behind. But social convention is a boundary that protects us. Specifically in this case, it protects women. They're protected by that social boundary. But the cowherd boys, they don't have that boundary. So it's very special. I know some devotees who think, that's really like, that's the rasa to go for. Because there's such intimacy and freedom, and the social boundaries are just not there. So it's special. The whole chapter 12 that leads up to the Agasura demon being killed, the first half of the chapter is focused on the cowherd boys, the sakas, a particular kind of friendly relation. And Shukadeva Goswami himself is astounded at how fortunate they are. Of course, he very quickly goes to include all the associates of Vrindavan, but at least in that section, it's the good fortune, krita punya punja, how many lifetimes of pious activities has one undergone to get such opportunity. And more than in terms of the course of the day, during his childhood pastimes in Vrindavan, Krishna was with the cowherd boys and the cows more than he was with anybody else. All day long. All day long. It's like children and their school teacher. They're in school all day long for so many years. So Krishna's with the cowherd boys. And so the gopis are considered. They're not only they're not restricted by social constraints, but they're with him all day long. Very special. Very special.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, thank you for your presentation. There's another question here. So how should we as Vaishnavas celebrate today, today being Sri Ram Vijayotsava?
Read the Yujikanda. Hear the glories of the personality of Godhead. I would recommend also, from the time that it's really such a wonderful section, and the commentaries by the Sri Vaishnava Acharyas is also just heart-melting. But the 95 verses where Hanuman, seated in a branch of the tree, begins speaking the glories of Ram. Now, it doesn't get to the killing of Ravan, but the glories of Lord Ramachandra. It's very sweet, and it's very enlivening. It's we know from Nectar Devotion, all these things, all 95 verses, they're stimulations for ecstatic love, udipan, and that's what Hanuman is doing. Hanuman is stimulating Sita's ecstatic love, and it works. So it will work for us too. You don't have to be Sita to be stimulated by hearing. And he sent Hanuman, that's the last third of all those verses, to find Sita. And it tells us how interested the personality of Godhead is to reunite us with him. That's what the Acharyas describe. So the killing of Ravana becomes secondary, although that's the festival today. The greater festival than the killing of Ravana festival is the Glories of Ram festival. And it's a really the big festival. When we're having a festival, we glorify the personality of Godhead. So that's a wonderful section. I encourage you to look at it if you have a copy of Ramayana.
Hare Krishna, just if it's okay, one other quick question. The topic this morning is Dasya, and you mentioned in the beginning of your lecture that Dasya is sort of integrated in all the other rasas.
Yes.
I suspect you mean the primary rasas.
Yes.
So how do we understand that Dasya in Shanta rasa? That's my first question. And the second question is that does that Dasya extend into the other, let's say, the secondary rasas like dread, gastefulness, compassion, anger, those things, chivalry. Does it integrate, with those secondary rasas also?
Well, back to the first part of your question. The passage that I read was purposeful. Canto 10, Chapter 9, Text 21, 10, 9, 21. Mother Yashoda's love for Krishna is being particularly honored in that verse and the next verse. And in the purport, Prabhupada explains that those that are not able to appreciate or experience the kind of love that the residents of Vrindavan have, like Yashoda has, include the yogis, the tapasvis, and the gyanis. And in Prabhupada's purport, he says, sometimes it is said that these three categories of persons experience Shantaras, but actually devotional service begins from Dasyaras. So the first part of your question is Shanta doesn't include Dasya. Dasya is where devotional service begins, and Shanta is on veneration. But it's part of what the spiritual world has. It has on veneration. And for us, devotional service begins with Dasya. That's what Dasyam is. So that's my reply to the first part of your question. The second part of your question is these secondary rasas and what role do they have with Dasya? Well, they have a secondary role with not only Dasya, but the other four primary rasas. And, the science of rasa is a little elevated for a Sunday feast lecture, but I can say this much. Their secondary rasas, they complement and augment the primary rasas. That's why they're given that term secondary. So they enhance, they facilitate, they nourish the primary rasas. So go back to the four, and that Dasya is present in friendship plus something. And then the friendship includes Dasya and friendship plus when it's in parental affection. And then the parental affection, everything that's there is included plus. So Dasya is there throughout the remaining four primary rasas. And secondary rasas are nourishing those primary rasas.
Thank you. Very nicely explained. Thank you very much.
Okay. So how are we doing, our facilitator here?
Hare Krishna Maharaj, we have about 10 minutes more.
Yeah, do we have any more chat questions or anything somebody wants to unmute themselves and speak, and otherwise we can end when we're done.
So there's one question here from Jailalita Mataji in the chat. I'll read it. Where does Shantara stand in terms of being one of the 5 rasas? The plants and trees in Goloka, for example, are in Shantaras.
Yes.
But it seems to be a lesser position than Dasya ras.
Yes, it is.
Because it is one more of appreciation of Krishna than of active service. Yet surely those in that position are also devotees.
Yes, they are. Well, they're devotees, but they're not engaged in active service. I think the best explanation that I can offer comes in Canto 10, Chapter 35. Canto 10, Chapter 35. That's the Song of the Gopis. As Krishna has gone off to the forest to herd the calves, the focus of that section goes to the sound of the flute and how the sound of Krishna's flute, which is used by him to call the cows, affects all the living entities in Braja. All those in Shantarasa, by hearing the sound of Krishna's flute, they experience ecstasy. So though it's Shanta, and they're not exactly doing devotional service as we know, Dasya, Bhakti, because they're Shanta Bhaktas, they experience ecstasy in contact with the form of Krishna, the flute of Krishna, the lotus feet of Krishna. They're in ecstasy, and they exhibit symptoms of ecstasy. So they're conscious, but they're not in the position of engaging in active service otherwise. That's, I think, the best that I can do to answer Jailalita's question.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Hare Krishna, so there's a follow-up question to your point, Maharaj. Why then do devotees sometimes pray to be born as a blade of grass in Vrindavan?
Because it's fortunate. Because such a blade of grass, it represents humility, and in that humility, they want the mercy of the residents of Vrindavan. In particular, Uddhava wants to be a blade of grass to get the dust from the gopis, and Brahma prays for any kind of birth so he can get the dust from any of the residents of Vrindavan. So the focus goes to the exalted nature of the residents of Vrindavan, including even the dust from the feet of such residents. So they could pray for any kind of a birth, but the expression is a humble one, even a blade of grass, just to catch the dust from the lotus feet of the residents of Vrindavan. It's humility on their side and glorification of the residents of Vrindavan on the other side, or the dust from the feet of the residents of Vrindavan on the other side. It's an expression of humility.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, what does Lord Rama's killing Ravan represent in our lives as practicing Vaishnavas?
Oh, nice question. So, what Ravana is a demon, and very similar to what Bhaktivinoda Thakur writes about Krishna's killing demons in Vrindavan. The different demons represent different obstacles in the path of bhakti for a sadhaka. That's us. Similarly, the Sri Vaishnavacharyas describe the killing of demons in Ramayana as Ram destroying obstacles that each of the demons he kills represent. So the most formidable of all the demons is Ravan. And his personification, he is the personification of lust. Others, Kara, Dushan, etc., represent other. Ravan is in unstoppable lust. And lust, of course, in this case means enjoying the objects of the senses in the form of a female from the side of a male. But the broader sense of lust is wanting to be the enjoyer of the energy of the personality of Godhead separate from the possessor of that energy, wanting to enjoy Sita in the absence of Ram, wanting to enjoy the energy of the Supreme Lord minus the Supreme Lord. So such a personification or such a tendency, the Lord will help us to overcome. The significance is overcoming such tendency. Ram is more than willing to destroy such tendency in the heart of anybody, including us. So the significance is victory over that lust. There's a similar question, different, but similar question comes up in relation to, maybe you've heard this question asked before, is there some significance in the first demon that Ram kills is a woman, and the first demon that Krishna kills is a woman? Is there some significance in the first demon both of them kill as a woman? And I asked a number of scholars, and the only answer that one Vaishnav Acharya, Hari Shuri, has explained is similar to Ravana being killed. That is, the most prominent snare for a person who is trying to progress in spiritual life is trying to be the enjoyer of material opulence, either gold or the opposite sex. In this case, a man trying to enjoy a woman, or the other way around. Because when one is going on a spiritual path, wealth and women are the primary attractions that are distractions that capture somebody. So because Putana and Tataka were women, the Sanskrit word for desire is asha, which is feminine. So the desire to be the enjoyer of. Circling back to the question about the significance of Dussehra, or the killing of Ravan by Ram, is lust. It's a full circle. So there's the object, and there's the perpetrator of that great misfortune. That's Ravan. It's a formidable obstacle for anyone that wants to move on the path of spiritual life. One should be well aware and be prepared to take shelter of the personality of God to protect one from such a distraction or obstacle on the path of devotional service. So it looks like we've completed our 1 hour. So our facilitator, you can do the wrap up, whatever you need to do here.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, would you like to give a brief concluding message this morning?
Sure. Brief. Since the overall theme, as I understood it, was the Anukul Yasha Sankalpa series of verses, that's the Sharanagati lesson that we find in Hari Bhakti Vilas. The surrender brings one, they're all angas or limbs of devotional service. To surrender means to be engaged in devotional service, using everything, body, mind, and words, in the service of the personality of Godhead. So that's dasya indicates that, the mood of being the servant in all circumstances of life. So when one is in that mode of service, there's an object of that service. The object is the personality of Godhead. And as we become attached, not just to being servants, because it's one thing to be, you like to do service, it's another thing to be attached to the object of service. So the maturing stage for us is to become attached to Krishna, the object of our service. And that takes some maturing. That's as bhakti matures, then the personality of the object, the personality of our where we're reposing our service becomes more prominent. My sense of the maturing stage of bhakti is, as that evolves, the other refinements follow. The good character, good quality, good disposition, refined speech, everything flows from that one thing, becoming attached to the personality of Godhead. That's the fruit of dasya. So it's my concluding words. And thank you for inviting me. And I'll be back again sometime. I think Diwali or something like that.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, thank you once again on behalf of our temple here for agreeing to come on this platform. And despite your busy schedule, you have chosen to give your association in the form of presenting this morning on this topic of Dasyam and also today's Dussehra festival. So thank you, and we do look forward to hear from you more often. Hari Kirtan here is saying Govardhan Puja. So we'd be like if you can be there for the Govardhan Puja presentation. But nevertheless, we want to thank you, Maharaj, for the presentation, and we like to thank all the devotees who participated by asking questions and participated in the discussions.
Hare Krishna.
So now we'll go for the beautiful Artik ceremony of their lordships, Shri Param Karnitai Gaurachandra. So